Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Muir, Alberta. Guess what? You're not going to believe this. I know this is right out of thin air, coming right out of left field, but the federal government in Canada is actually trying to take more control than they had before. I know. It is almost unfathomable to believe that, but it's happening. They're actually doing that. You may recall last summer, there was an incident in Edgewood, BC that resulted in the death of over 300 ostriches, 360 or 380 ostriches or something like that, because at one point, one of them sneezed. Then, upon looking into this, I find out that under the direction of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, 8.7 million chickens or poultry of some sort have been culled in British Columbia in the last few years since the stamping out policy started. And, if that's not bad enough, now the CFIA is trying to tighten their noose around our ranchers. And that's not just Alberta, it's all over the country. Today, as I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, I saw some social media stuff out of Ontario, producers out there very concerned about what the CFIA is doing as well. So what I did is I reached out to two fine gentlemen who are producers in my area in Alberta. And they are both involved in this conversation and they have concerns about it. So I said, hey, let's get on the podcast and talk about it, because as we know, the more information we have, the better choices we can make and the more we can affect the outcome of our future. So in the interest of getting the information, I would like to welcome to the show Mr. Lance Neilson and Mr. Tim Hoven. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me.
Hey, well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we know you guys, you got busy farms to run. I'm sure you're setting aside chores to do this, so we really appreciate your time. So I'm going to start with you, Lance, just because I saw your TikTok that you did, and I saw you talking about this in a little bit of social media stuff. So do you want to kind of give us the in a nutshell, what is going on? What's the CFIA doing? And why is it of interest to not only producers, but also consumers?
Sure. Yeah. So about in December, the industry started to get, hear about some changes that were coming. Now, these changes apparently the process started back in 2023, but producers, by and large, really started hearing about it just before Christmas. And then here in the past week, it really ramped up. So what the changes are, is we're going to have to start reporting movement of cattle in a lot of scenarios. So like if you take an animal to a vet, if you, 4-H shows, cattle shows, sales, if you sell an animal, it has to be recorded. The actual individual specific animal has to be recorded, saying where it moved to. Now, we have a process in Canada already to track down diseases, to trace diseases, and it's been working for a long time. In fact, we've never had a failure. It's never not worked. And that process is, we have branding irons, we have manifests, like a paper manifest that we fill out if you need to sell an animal or take an animal somewhere. And we have brand inspectors. And that process has served us well. It's actually what our American neighbors also use. Plus, for the past 20 years, we do have an electronic tag in each cow's ear. That was a BSC related thing that came in. And so we have herd of origin, so they know exactly where that animal came from. So what they're doing is taking a system that works, has never not worked. It's worked 100% of the time, every time, and adding on this additional layer of tracking the individual animal, the individual cow, where she goes in her life. And, that's going to cause a lot more, compliance paperwork for farmers. It's going to cause a lot more cost. And, quite frankly, it's just none of their business where I take my cattle. And I just want to clarify, I don't want there to be any misinformation. You don't have to record what grass pasture you take them to. If it's within your own farm, you don't have to report that at this stage. However, if you look at our European neighbors, they do have to report stuff like that. So things usually happen in stages. It never gets less regulation. So, but if they're ever going somewhere where they're off of your farm, you have to tell the government about it.
Tim, I'm going to go to you in just a second, but I want to let you folks know, in case you're wondering, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they have very, very broad powers. They don't just deal with ostriches or chickens or turkeys. They deal with everything. And they can, at the direction of the upper echelons of power, they can come onto a farm, they can condemn a herd or a flock or a crop or whatever, and there is really nothing you can do about it. You can have 5,000 people come and camp out on your property protesting what the CFIA is going to do, and they will bring the RCMP in there. They'll clear everything out, and they will do what they do. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's what kind of power the CFIA has, and we've seen it over the last little while. We hadn't seen it up like to this extent until the ostriches, because most producers, when this happens, they say, okay, give us our payout, we'll cull our flock, and we'll get a new one in. But in this case, it was a little bit different, and it really brought the public into the mix, and it exposed what the potential is. And Tim, with what Lance has said that the system is working. There hasn't been a breakdown of the system. And I'm wondering if maybe this isn't just to make sure that the system is working. It seems to me as though this is more about surveillance by people who don't raise animals for who knows what reason. What do you think?
Well, the reason the CFIA is doing this, I'm just going to read from their website as to why we have traceability requirements.
Perfect.
It is to increase Canada's ability to prevent, prepare for, and respond to animal disease outbreaks or other emergencies. What the CFIA wants to do is they want to be able to sit at a computer, type in the 12-digit CFIA number or CCIA number that we put on those little yellow ear tags, type it in, and look at their little computer screen and see the movement of that cattle all across Canada, and then also be able to tell what animals were on adjacent farms at any point in that animal's lifespan. If we had another outbreak like mad cow, the government could type in one CCIA number and they would know every animal over the entire lifespan of that infected animal that were within a half mile of it. So they then could come in, if they so chose, and slaughter every animal that was adjacent to that farm so they can stop the spread of the disease. That's the whole intent of this. It's going to cost millions and millions of dollars just for a big what if into the future. Whereas, like Lance said, the system we have now works. Is it perfect? Of course not. Systems are never perfect. But this new system is going to be 100% government overreach and control. And we have to do what we can to stop it and have a system that's actually sane and doesn't just protect the export markets, it protects the farmers who are operating within the system. This current proposed system does not protect farmers.
Now, there might be people out there thinking, what's the big deal? We need to know. We have to be able to protect animals and protect people. I'm going to share two things with you folks, and this should terrify you. The language that the CFIA has in their policy, it doesn't say that if an animal is exposed and tested and test positive, they're destroyed. It's if an animal is sick or there is a suspicion of sickness or disease. It's not just if they have the disease, and that was part of the issues with the ostriches. People wanted to have them tested, and the CFIA said, no, we're going to fine you $200,000 per bird if you test them. They did it on a suspicion of illness. That's the first part. The second part is, and this usually, and people miss this one, we've been dealing with these things for thousands of years. For thousands of years, human beings have interacted with chickens with avian flu. For thousands of years, we've interacted with cows with diseases similar to mad cow or maybe even mad cow. And even things like elk. We've been consuming and interacting with elk with chronic wasting disease and deer for thousands of years. And none of those things, except for avian flu, respiratory stuff, transfers over, and we've been eating them and it hasn't been a problem. But now all of a sudden, it's like there's this absolute ridiculous campaign against destruction of animals or mass inoculation of animals to protect us. But we didn't really need that protection before. You want to chime in on that one, Lance?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. I think that is lost on a lot of this conversation. We get so, all of these regulations that they're proposing are just to incrementally improve a couple data points, right? Like there's no failure in the system, like I said earlier. And every time we add regulation, we end up doing damage to an industry, right? We end up having consolidation. It adds barriers to entry for people to even want to start. And all of that is just for maybe they could track something in a day quicker. We got to think long and hard before we add a regulation that will never go away. The regulation will stay forever. When all we're talking about is just slight incremental data improvement. And this is a serious moment for the industry to think about.
Well, I don't know any time in the history of this country or the world when giving up control and sovereignty to the government hasn't been a good thing for people. That was a joke.
Yeah. Well, I detected some sarcasm.
Yeah. One of the comments. Go ahead, Lance.
Sorry, I actually did some. Well, a person commented on my social media about the CFIA actually published an economic analysis of the proposed changes, and like to me, that's what the question needs to be answered. Like there has to be an economic, question or economic benefit to do that, right? And so the CFIA actually published an economic analysis of this back in 2023. They said, look, if we can respond quicker, that incremental data improvement, if we can respond quicker to a potential outbreak, a what if of something, and we respond quicker and get the border open quicker for exports, we see a net benefit to the industry of about 158 million over a 20-year period, if something were to happen, if. And there's going to be a cost to that. So they said the direct cost of that, of producers actually buying tags, doing all the work that goes along with it, the labor cost, that sort of thing, the actual direct cost. The actual cost of that is 128 million over that same period, or 12 million a year. So that's a net benefit. Saying best case scenario, if we can respond faster to disease and just taking the direct cost of the tags and the time, that's a net benefit of 30 million bucks over 20 years for the whole cattle industry, or 2.8 million a year. So I threw that number into ChatGPT and said, how many cows are in Alberta divided by 2.8 million? That works out to 70 cents a cow. All this extra work, all this extra oversight, control, overreach for an optimistic net benefit from the CFIA for 70 cents a cow a year. And that's not even thinking about the downstream effects of more regulation does for the average person who even want to get involved in the industry.
Yeah.
In the comments, somebody mentioned, and I saw this online as well, and actually on the CFIA's website, the CFIA stated that they consulted with industry over a period of time, and these are the recommendations that came from industry. Were you guys ever consulted about any of this as Albertan producers?
So, like I said at the beginning, the first I think most anybody heard about it was in December, about mid-December. And now I'm not saying there was, I think there was, a call out to producers to attend meetings by our industry groups. So like, we have industry groups like the Canadian Cattle Association, Alberta Beef Producers, and different, right? And I'm not saying there wasn't a call. I'm sure there was. They probably put it in a magazine, stuff like that. But I haven't talked to a single person yet that saw that or knew about it. Everybody I've talked to, all of a sudden, this is a bombshell, like out of left field.
Tim?
Back in December, a woman who is a friend of my wife's sent me a text and said, Tim, have you heard about this? And she was stumbling, she was on YouTube and came across a video designed for children for the 4-H program that talked about these upcoming changes. And she said, hey, have you heard anything about this? It's kind of funny that they're doing the video for the kids, but not for the actual producers who are operating the farms. So at that point, we talked, we decided to have a meeting in December. That was at the Swiss View Hall. And that was the day it was set for, was the day we had this terrible snowstorm that had the 100-car pileup down in Airdrie.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, my single post talking about this meeting was viewed over 200,000 times. Now, that's just my original post. That's not people who screenshotted the post. That's not people who copied the image and shared it. It really took off. We were expecting a couple hundred people, but the weather stopped people from coming. So we only had about 100 people there. The excitement and the energy about these changes just show that this rule, this regulation, is not meeting the needs of producers. Chris, like you're saying, they were not properly consulted on it, because if the producers didn't know it was coming, they weren't properly consulted on it. And that's not the farmer's fault. That's the CCIA, it's the CFIA, it's the Alberta beef producers' fault for not educating their producers about the changes that they agreed to and that they're pushing through. So over the last week, we've had all the producers, not just in Alberta, all across Canada, sharing this information, emailing their MPs. Conservative MPs were posting, hey, we don't support this. Pierre Poilievre put a tweet out that he doesn't support this. I know the Premier's office was calling CCIA down in Calgary asking what's going on. And it was really one Facebook post in December, and then another Facebook post from Dawn, a friend of ours, a couple weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago, in fact, that caused this huge, massive uproar. And enough people stood up, enough people complained, enough people made phone calls and sent messages that the province came out against it, the Alberta beef producers came out against it, the Saskatchewan beef producers came out against it. It just goes to show that one or two little people can make a big change if they're doing the right thing and standing up for people.
They did put a pause on this. At least that's what I saw yesterday from the CFIA. They released that on social media. But you know, I'm not a beef producer. I'm not a farmer. I wish I was. That's kind of what I wanted to do. There was two things I wanted to do. I wanted to fly fighter planes or be a farmer, and both were too expensive. So I never did either. But what I have been doing is kind of paying attention to the pulse of, you know, government and government interaction with society. And I feel as though at every turn, there's something coming out of government that wants to put constraints on people or different, demographics or whatever. And it feels like there's a measure of control that just keeps on creeping in, and it's getting more and more and more. I mean, we're seeing surveillance systems in cities. We see the federal government trying to bribe provinces to have digital health tracking for everybody and share that with the federal government. You know, we see this with the ostriches, now with the chickens and the poultry, and now with ranchers. Do either of you feel that kind of increase in control? Tim, you use the word overreach, so I'm sure you've kind of been feeling it.
I have. It's just been slow and steady, not just in the ranching industry, but all across the entire agricultural spectrum. In Alberta, for those people watching outside of Alberta, the provincial government came out with an on-farm processing certificate. So if you wanted to butcher your own animals, it would be legal to sell them to customers. So they were 3 years ago, they really bragged it up. It's a great program. Lots of people signed up, and things went well for about 2 years. And then the government started tightening the noose around all these producers' necks. They started demanding, who did you sell your product to? So if you did not report your customers to the government, you were breaking the law. They also then completely reduced the number of animals you could process. I know of one producer who spent, I think it was $60,000 or $80,000 developing the facility to slaughter his own beef so they could make money on their farm. It was a small farm. This was a great opportunity for them. But then the provincial government, not CFIA this time, they shrunk the number of beef he could sell in that facility. And I think the number is 4. Isn't that correct, Lance?
I think it's a weight. I think it's 5,000
Pounds.
I think it's weight. So that's like a hanging weight max. Yeah.
Right. But that's not enough weight to justify the cost of that processing facility he made. So the government giveth and the government taketh away.
Well, there is a theory that government should control everything because we don't do it good enough. There is a theory out there, and some people buy into that. But the farmers and ranchers that are in business in Alberta, I believe they're the best in the world. And they know what they're doing. Like, this isn't. I don't see a necessity for government to be exercising a stranglehold. Lance, you and I met because of government overreach in my restaurant. I mean, they literally came for my business and said someone sneezed, so I had to give up my livelihood, and that's how we met. So I know, you're aware of this kind of thing. What's your feeling on that subject?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the trend, not just in agriculture, but across all industries for sure. Is more overreach, and it's just a commentary on the way society is going. There's no trust. We're quick to have no trust in the people actually doing the work. We think that they have to have oversight and regulation to keep them doing their job right, and I think that has pretty wide consequences. Just how society operates when it's a top-down, no trust approach.
It does, because if we in the market in Alberta, if we buy our food from a supplier and the food isn't good, we don't buy it from there anymore, and that's kind of how it works. So there's a very good business case for farmers and ranchers to put out a really good product because they want people to buy the product. But now, and we can influence those decisions. We can vote with our wallet. We can buy food wherever we want, so to speak, in Alberta. But we've given up that trust relationship, and instead we allow some bureaucrats thousands of kilometers away to make those decisions for us and tell us who we can buy from and who we can sell to. And I really don't think it's a good path to go down. So I'm glad that people are paying attention to it and speaking out. And you know what? If not for the events over the last 5 years, I probably wouldn't have been paying attention either, because we don't seem to pay attention until something affects us. Now, the beautiful thing here is there's so many people paying attention to these things, these topics with a kind of a common thread, that they realize that it's going to start affecting them. What are some of the consequences you kind of foresee if we allow this kind of restriction to happen to our farms and our ranches? Like, what do you think the average person might see or feel as a consequence to these actions if we don't stop them?
Well, I think immediately, I mean, there'll be the cost and the extra labor to comply, that sort of thing. But I think immediately you're going to have smaller producers, people that are lifestyle farmers. Maybe they have a couple steers that they want to raise for meat. Maybe they have just a handful of cows because they want their kids to grow up doing chores, the lifestyle they want to live. The more regulation you put on is just going to drive them away from doing that. It's much harder for them to comply if they don't have all the equipment, and the equipment is expensive. So on a per head basis, it's just unreasonable for them to even think of doing. So, I don't think we want to encourage society to not be able to, or not want to grow their own food. Livestock is a very entry level way to farm. You can buy a steer, you can grass it if you got a couple acres. Like, we should be encouraging people. We should be encouraging kids to grow up knowing where the food came from, and something like this immediately causes consolidation and has smaller producers exit. And that has to be talked about.
Tim?
There's an excellent post that I just read today from the Iron Quill. I never heard of the guy before. It's on Substack. And he goes through the consequences of this. And he talks about how rodeo is effectively going to be almost shut down because of the risk and liability of having all these different producers bringing their animals to a centralized location and going from one rodeo to another rodeo to another rodeo all throughout the summer. the risk and liability of a disease outbreak and the risk of doing something wrong and getting a major fine from the CFIA could possibly shut down the rodeo circuit. And I'm going to agree with Lance. I think the biggest long-term consequence of this, which I'm sure the CFIA hasn't thought about, it's going to stop new people from getting into the industry. It's going to stop the hobby farmer. The ear tag reader that I use on my farm cost me about $4,000, and that was 20 years ago. And when I want to upgrade that piece of equipment, I think it's costing about $4,000 or $5,000 now. If you're a small producer with 10 cows, logistically, you need to have the electronic equipment to do it, or you're going to be making mistakes. You're going to be getting fined. But no small producer can afford to spend $3,000 or $4,000 on an ear tag reading wand. It's going to force small producers to get out. It's going to stop young kids from learning how to grow beef in the 4-H program. It might not sound like a bad thing when it talks about wanting to stop the spread of disease and protecting international markets, but it's the unthought about consequences that are going to have long-term ramifications across the industry. If we look at what the quota system did in dairy and chicken and eggs, if you look at how many dairy producers there were back in the 50s when they brought in the quota compared to how many dairy producers there are now, I think it's about 10% of the numbers of dairy producers now. And the population has risen probably, dramatically. I'm not going to try to do math in the live chat. But it's the unforeseen consequences that are the really scary thing to me. It's going to drive people out of the industry. I'm a young farmer at 55. I don't know how you feel, Lance. When I go to farmer meetings, I'm still one of the young guys there. I know of maybe 10 guys in my entire county who are younger than me who are full-time farming. And we need to have policies and regulations that get young people out of the cities and back onto the land raising livestock, instead of having policies that are going to chase people off the land.
Well, I just want to add something there that you said about fines, right? That's a big part of it with especially the smaller ones that aren't 100% clear. Sometimes it's not their business. They have a job in town. This is meant just for a lifestyle farm. If you're scared that you potentially could get a fine because you didn't understand the rules well enough, because the rules change and they're complicated, you're just not going to be part of it. To be afraid of a fine coming your way is no way to live.
Here's something that I'm concerned about. Right now in Alberta, we have somewhat of a choice where we can buy our food. We can buy from a boutique farm, boutique shop. We can get grass-fed stuff, organic, whatever. There's a wide range of things. We even get farms that raise boutique animals, like I don't know, like those Scottish cows or the Longhorns. We have choice right now, and a lot of those outfits are kind of smaller. So if we start pushing some of these smaller, I don't know if boutique is the word, but smaller operations out of the market by over-regulating and just making it impossible to do business, we might end up in a situation where we no longer have that choice. We might end up in a situation where the only ranches and farms that can survive are corporate structured, massive operations. And I get that there's a need for massive operations like that because we feed billions of people. We need those big farms, but people can make the choice right now. They can choose whether they want to buy from a producer who is mass vaccinating, using growth hormones, steroids, antibiotics, all those things, the things that are necessary on the big farms because it's such a huge thing to manage. Or they can pay a little bit more and they can buy from a smaller producer and they can take control over their health sovereignty by making those choices. If we allow the government to regulate them out of business, all of a sudden we could very quickly be left with only one or two options where to buy our food. And we lose the ability to choose what kind of food we put in our body. And that to me is extremely dangerous, especially considering the way the governments have been moving lately. And that is, trust the science, just sit down, shut up, and let us do it to you. I think is a very dangerous path.
Well, what's the number one concern of the urban consumer? I think it's, the number one thing is corporate farms, commercial farms.
Yeah.
That's the number one. The industry were to fight one, and it's really not even true. But if they were to fight one misconception, it's that there's commercial farms, and most all farms are smaller and still family owned. But more regulation, doing this actually feeds in and creates the very problem that's the number one customer concern. I don't understand how this is good for an industry.
How about you, Tim?
I'm just thinking about the issue with the meat processors here in the country of Canada. I believe there's 2 companies that own all the major federally inspected meat. Actually, there's 3 companies, that control all the federally inspected meat processing facilities here in the province. So it might not be a monopoly, but it's definitely an oligopoly with 3 companies controlling the entire meat supply for the majority of the country. That is not good for consumers. It's not good for producers. It's not good for the nation at all. And if this goes through, we lose all these small producers who are trying just to make their way through life and grow some food. It's going to be a consolidation, not just of the processors, but a consolidation of the beef producers. Anytime people talk about centralizing power, anytime people talk about getting more and more control in a system, it never ends well for the larger community. It's great for the people with control, but everyone else suffers.
And those, it's doubly great for the people with control because it prevents and precludes others from entering the market. I mean, how could you, if I say I woke up tomorrow and I decide, you know what, I'm going to be a dairy farmer. There is no way, it would be 100% impossible for me to borrow enough money at a low enough interest rate to get into the market and be competitive at all, and we see that in other industries. We see that in energy. In Alberta, the gas companies are so big that it's almost impossible for someone to get into the market and become a retailer and supply. And I think that's really, Tim, you're right. It's really dangerous. At some point, you end up with so few choices that you're basically going along for the ride and there's nothing you want to do about it. And that is a really good segue into this part of my talk. It's no secret that I am a Alberta sovereigntist. I 100% believe in an independent Alberta where we can manage these things on our own, do stuff locally the way we want to do it. This type of thing, being unable to influence the bureaucracy that's imposing the policy on us in Western Canada, is one of the main reasons why I went, both feet in on Alberta independence. And I know this is kind of on your radar as well, Tim. How would you like to see Alberta deal with these issues locally?
Well, Chris, I think the number one thing we have to do after we achieve that yes vote in the referendum is we have to fight like hell to make sure that Alberta does not become little Canada. The problem we have is that many, many people across this country love big government. And that's the number one problem we have to fight against. There was this Facebook comment. I was reading comments over the weekend, and this is from a person who was thankful for the CFIA regs. And here's what she said. At the end of the day, this is about biosecurity and protecting our livelihoods. If a neighbor down the road ends up with a disease outbreak, I don't want the government guessing where my cows are. I want them to know exactly where my herd is so we can protect them. Now, that is just insane. Is this person going to be putting a microchip in their head so the government knows where they are 24 hours a day so the government can protect them? We have to get this message out to people that we've got to fight for freedom. We've got to fight for personal sovereignty. We've got to fight for private property. And if we're not careful, we might vote for an independent Alberta, and enough people haven't changed their hearts to these values that I know you and I hold dear, and we'll end up with what I call little Canada, which will be worse.
I'll be that annoying guy, that annoying guy that the lawyers hate on social media, talking about what they're talking about for the Constitution of Alberta and why people need to be outraged. I will be that guy, and that's going to be my mission in life, is to make sure that Alberta has a foundation that makes it so Albertans control Albertans' future and nobody else. How about you, Lance?
And so you control your future.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
That's the most important thing.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm with you guys for sure. That's I'm on the same page, and we can't just have a replication of the problems that we already experience here. So yeah, I'm happy that people like the two of you are involved in steering the ship there to make sure that we don't have those same problems when the time comes.
We're sure trying. There are people in the comments. I'm well aware that there are some people that believe that we can just fix these issues. We can just we'll elect a different MP, or we'll write some letters or a strongly worded letter to our MP, and they'll go to Parliament and they'll advocate for us, and the things will change. I have very little faith in that path. I recognize that it is a possible path, but I don't believe that it's plausible. It seems to me, and I didn't grow up in Alberta or Saskatchewan in farming families, so I don't have firsthand experience, but it seems to me as though the producing provinces haven't really been able to affect the way in which they're governed or the policies in which they operate under. You guys have been in the industry long enough. Is that accurate, or have you been able to influence federal policy sometimes to change the way you're governed?
Well, I would say that's very rare that we can influence federal policy to change the way we're governed. I was having that conversation with my wife today, actually, about that. Like, what can we do about the CFIA if this halt just turns into a pause for a couple of weeks and continues on? Well, I mean, the answer, I don't know. The answer is nothing. I mean, we have a federal Liberal government. What is the answer? They're based in Ottawa. Liberals are in charge. I don't think there is much influence we can have on that if we, if we don't stand up and make a difference as in Alberta here.
One of the things that we have to do following this, this month of outrage, the Alberta beef producers are having their annual general meeting here. I believe it's in March or April. And beef producers have to go to that meeting, and you have to vote for representatives who believe the same things that you do. We have to vote for people who are going to stand up and fight against CFIA. They're going to go to the CCIA organization and start making changes that are beneficial to farmers and not overregulate us to death. That is one thing we can do, because we can complain, we can cause problems for elected officials for a month, but you have to put the right people who believe the right things in the right place so they can make lasting change. And then you have to hold them accountable. And if they're not doing what they said, you get rid of them and you put someone new in who will do that job. I know I've talked to some of these representatives, and they're afraid to get out and meet the people because they know the people don't believe in the regulations that are being enforced on them. And that is so wrong when you are supposed to be a leader and you don't have the guts to talk to the people you're representing.
Yeah. That's something that our friend David taught us. Get involved and not just voting, get on a board, get on a school board, get on your library board, get on the what is it, the Canadian cattle industry or whatever.
The Alberta beef producers.
Alberta beef producers. Get on the boards and be part of the solution rather than just being affected by the problem the entire time. And it's my personal opinion that as an Alberta, it's probably too late for us to take back control that way. But even so, I think it's important that people continue to do that. And we've been doing that in Alberta for a few years, more than we ever have before. And we've seen some successes. We've seen so many successes that now we're actually collecting signatures to trigger a referendum on Alberta sovereignty. So these processes can work if people actually show up and do the work, right?
Yeah. Chris, did I ever tell you why I got involved with politics?
Pardon me, Tim?
Did I ever tell you why I started getting involved with politics?
Didn't I thought you had some medical emergency like stroke or something, and you decided that it'd be
there's
fun?
tons of stuff. But the core reason is here I was farming. I was doing everything I could to increase my soil health. I was trying to raise my animals the very best way I could. And I realized that for all the work I've done for decades on my farm, it could be erased with the stroke of a pen of one federal minister in Ottawa. And it could all change. And I came to the realization, as much as I love being on my farm, as much as I love working by myself where no one bugs me, I have to get off the farm and get involved, or else someone else is going to be making decisions over my life.
Bingo.
And it's the same for every beef producer. The problem we have is we love working by ourselves. We love getting in the tractor, listening to music, driving all day, and not having anyone disturb us. But if you do not get involved, if you prefer to stay in your tractor, you're throwing your life decisions to somebody else who doesn't deserve them.
Take control of your own future by exercising your own sovereignty.
100%.
What were you saying, Lance?
Here's what I'd like to see people to do. Tim is right. There's the annual general meeting for the Alberta beef producers, but they're actually having producer meetings across Alberta leading up to that. So I think starting as early as this week, the first meeting I think is up in Lacrete, a producer meeting, and then it's moving across Alberta. There's various stops: Grand Prairie to Drayton Valley, Olds, Fort Macleod, Owen, all over the place, right? So attend these meetings, and at those meetings you can put forward a resolution that has to be voted on and taken to that the AGM in March, I think it is. And the resolutions we need to put forward are I got to think about the wording a bit more on them, but it has to do with the CFIA having to prove need. For it to be supported, the CFIA has to be able to provide need, right? So we have an existing system that works. It has never failed. Like I want to harp on that a little bit more. We talk about, well, we don't want this increased regulation. It makes it sound like we are against traceability. We're not against traceability. We have a full traceable system that actually has never failed. So CFA needs to demonstrate need. We have a system that's never failed. So that resolution has to include that at all these different producer meetings. If every producer meeting brought forward a resolution to that effect, it forces at the AGM for that issue to be reckoned with. And up on top of need, we also need to have the resolution, or maybe a separate one, to talk about economic impact and the consolidation, the effect it would have on the industry. So I think that's important. I'm going to attend the one in Rumsey. I think it's February 10th. That's when I'll be at for sure. But I'd like to see everybody do that. And I don't think that should be limited to Alberta beef producers. People all have different spots they fit in on boards, right? Maybe you're on a county. Maybe you're on an agriculture society. Maybe there's all sorts of places people exist and serve in the community. And you can make a difference there. That same process of bringing forward a resolution, all these different bodies usually have a provincial organization. You bring those resolutions forward, and then the ag minister has to take note. We'll take note of those things. We got to have the numbers and all the societies pushing the same message out.
So if say some outside organization that we don't elect, or they're not accountable to us, say they're infiltrating policy in, I don't know, say Switzerland or something, and they want to impose that policy on us here in Alberta. The reality is they can't if people in Alberta are involved and filling board positions and having these conversations and speaking out. The only way that can happen to us is if people fail to exercise their democratic right to participate, right? And then we see all sorts of policy just creeping in here and there, little by little, And one day we look around and we think, wait a minute, we didn't ask for any of this. Why is this happening to us? What happens to us because we don't get involved and protect ourselves, right? There's always an activist that's going to try and do what they want to do, so that the people who are comfortable not being part of the conversation, that's the reason why these things happen, in my opinion. Kind of what you're saying, Lance.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a good question here from Shelley. Shelley says, who rules over the CFIA? Well, the CFIA is created by an act of parliament. So it's legislation. So there's an act that outlines the way in which the CFIA is supposed to operate. So technically, if they were doing a terrible job and Canadians from coast to coast, or even just Ontario and Quebec, elected a bunch of MPs that wanted CFIA reform, we would get CFIA reform because they would debate it in Parliament and then they would pass a law and that would govern how the CFIA operates. So nobody rules over them, but they exist because of a piece of an act of Parliament by legislation. That's how that works.
And it's probably the federal ag minister has the most direct control over CFIA.
Exactly. But they have an obligation to justify changes, right? So just because it makes it easier for them to click the button isn't necessarily a justification for imposing these restrictions on an industry. They don't have to consider economic impact. That's really not something they have to consider, but they do have to justify why it's needed. And that's an important thing that we got to drill down on.
This is a comment I get a lot, and it's a very valid fear from just regular people. It's all about killing the farm and controlling our lives. Well, I understand how people feel like that, because it sure does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that I think we need to remember is, regulations that are imposed today can be taken out of context tomorrow. And so while we think we're doing something about traceability today, they can be used tomorrow. For example, this morning I wake up and see Carney is saying they want to reduce methane by 30% in Canada. You don't think that the regulations we impose today on cattle and tracking is not going to be used in the future for those kind of programs? Like we have to be very aware of that.
Well, and now that you brought that up, whenever we see these arbitrary numbers presented by our elected, representatives, I don't even know that I can call them that, and a completely arbitrary number. Well, we need to reduce by 30%. Okay, where's the justification for that? Where's the science? How'd you come up with 30%? Oh, well, that's just what we need to do. Okay, but can you justify it? Yeah, it's justified because we have a problem. Well, no. What is with the arbitrary number? And it was the same. Here's another thing. They want to return 30% of our developed land back to wilderness in the name of biodiversity. They want to reduce fertilizer use by 30%. They want to reduce methane by 30%. They want to reduce CO2 output of these particular things by 30%. It's always this arbitrary number that just kind of magically appears out of nowhere. And then when you look at what we have to do to achieve it, it's like, okay, well, we need to end all agriculture, end all transportation, end all hydrocarbon use. Well, that doesn't really make sense. And the arbitrary number all of a sudden becomes more of a problem than a solution.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like so many of these decision makers don't understand the complexities of food production. If you reduce fertilizer use by 30% across the country, how much less food is going to be produced? And here we are, we're letting in, 1 million, 2 million new Canadians every year who still eat, they need food. And then on the other hand, we're trying to reduce how much food we actually grow in this country. It is as if this government is schizophrenic, and I'm not trying to insult schizophrenic people, but they're trying to go 4 different directions at once, and it's leading to multiple areas of complete chaos, which is going to end very badly for Canadians.
If I was conspiratorial, I would say that it's almost as if we're in a state of managed decline in which politicians are hiding behind smiles while they, tank our society so they can build back better or something. I just pulled that last build back better out of nowhere from nothing. So go ahead, Lance.
I mean that these kind of cattle movement regulations actually exist in Europe already. They have what they call cattle passports, that follows the animal everywhere in their life. They have that system in Europe already. And we don't have to have a magic crystal ball to see the effects of it. That's exactly what's happening in Europe. They're trying to reduce the amount of food. They actively are getting rid of their food production in Europe. And I can't understand why any leader of any country would want to reduce their country's ability to produce food, whether it's culling animals to reducing fertilizer for crops, those kind of things. It seems like they actually want their country to starve.
I have a brother-in-law in Scotland, and he told me about 15 years ago that farmers, to chase their cows across the government road, they need to get a permit from the local municipality to use the road to move animals.
That's wild. In this book, Values by Mark Carney, he describes some of these things as needing to have some constraints on our freedoms, on our food production, all sorts of things in the name of sustainability. Basically, if we don't constrain our food production, our energy use, we are all going to die. That's kind of it. So in this book, he basically talks about capitalism and energy use as the two greatest existential threats to humanity. But the reality is those two things, capitalism and energy use, are the two things that have contributed more to our prosperity, quality of life, longevity, ability to let machines do the work so we can think and solve problems. They're the two greatest accomplishments of humanity, yet he attacks them full bore in his book. And I think that really tells us what they really think, because he describes these constraints on freedoms occurring to the ordinary person, as in you and me and the viewers, not to them. So if you haven't read it, folks, I would suggest the read, if not for anything else than just to know what these policymakers are thinking when they impose these policies on us. Important. Here's a great question from Fran. Will Alberta Independence stop this craziness? If I have anything to do with it, yes, because I am going to participate, and I am going to make sure I'll do everything in my power to make sure that Alberta has a foundation based on a constitutionally enshrined policy that make sure we have choice, freedom, and liberty going forward. And if we don't do that, then we'll just be a little Canada, like Tim said. Oh, there's Bonnie. How on earth does the CFIA come up with those numbers? That's a very good question.
That is a good question, and they didn't go into detail in their economic impact analysis, other than to say, if we were able to pinpoint something a couple days earlier and get a border closure open a couple days earlier, that's how they came up with the positive number. But I mean, that's all absolute estimations. I mean, that's if something happened. That's a lot of ifs.
This is a very bold statement. I'm not going to say that I disagree. A book that I would recommend folks to read if they want to know what weaponized bureaucracy looks like in its rawest, most evil form, read The Gulag Archipelago by how do you say his name?
Solzhenitsyn.
Solzhenitsyn. Yeah. Long read, very long read. But that book was written by a guy that lived in Soviet Russia, and he was in the Gulag for a while, and he wrote this book in his head. He memorized the entire thing as he wrote it, because if he had been caught writing this type of book, exposing what communism, what socialism does in that regard, they would have just executed him. Fantastic read, although it will take you a couple weeks probably.
That should be required reading for every high school student. I agree.
100%.
That's the most important books ever.
100%. Elementary school should be 1984 and the Animal Farm, along with some Steinbeck stuff, and high school, Gulag Archipelago for sure. Yeah. There was a couple other questions I wanted to get to, and it's just about 1 hour on the dot, so this is just about perfect. And I'm going to give you guys an opportunity. If you have anything else you want to talk about, feel free. I'm just scrolling through the comments right now, trying to find the ones that I was looking for. Here's someone who knows all about what court is like and fighting the government. My friend Tamara says they likely consulted their own experts. Unfortunately, we've certainly had our share of that in the last 5 years, haven't we?
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting story. Another subject. I was working on some affiliates that I was going to include in my podcast, so I could share some good products and services with people that would align with their values. And I thought I had the perfect one. It was going to be awesome. And my follow-up call, I found out that they said I was too controversial to promote their product because of my close ties with my good friend Tamara and my association with the Freedom Convoy. And I was flabbergasted because that particular company raised millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars of business from people just like me who want to take control of their personal sovereignty, whether it's in health or wealth. So, Tamara, I would take you as a friend over that type of affiliate any day, FYI.
I remember you asked me that question, Chris, once back a few years ago there. I can't remember what we were doing. You might not even remember this moment, but you asked, would it be okay if I said your name about something associated with me? Or so I can't remember what it was, but I just remember
I had your stuff in my freezer.
Maybe, yeah. I just, why would I, of course, why would I ever care? I'm proud to be associated with that. So, yeah, I'm not sure why people think that's a detriment.
Well, I certainly appreciate you saying that. It was a bit of a gut punch when I heard that, but no, we'll find someone else. That's all right. And Lance, I loved having your products in the store. They were fantastic. Lance does a great job. He's got some excellent products at Neilson Beef. The only reason I don't have it anymore is because the freezer that I was using cost me like $600 a month in electricity, and it just wasn't paying the rent having it in the store, unfortunately, so I had to stop doing it. But yeah, fantastic products, Lance.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cameron said no. His farming neighbors had no awareness of the consultations either. So I think that's a common thread in this conversation, is that these things are being done to us, not for us, right?
Yeah.
And public consultation means the CCIA probably wrote a letter to the Alberta beef producers, the Saskatchewan beef producers, and all the beef producer groups across the country, and asked them for comments. And because all these cattle producer groups are, they're not government bodies, they're industry bodies representing cattle producers, technically that's consultation.
Here's one thing
your representative had a chance to speak on this.
They said that to me about the hospitality industry as well when they shut my business down. I said, well, I was never consulted. Oh, well, we consulted the Alberta Hospitality Association and they're good with it. I'm like, who's that?
Yeah.
So one thing I'd add to the beef industry that we have going for us is, people that represent us on these boards, Alberta beef producers and on all these, they're generally pretty like-minded people, right? They do value, we all kind of value the same thing. We all value freedom. We're not dealing with a lot of different outlooks on life for the most part. The people on the board of the Alberta beef producers, they're very like-minded. So I view that as a very, very strong, benefit to our industry to stand up against these things. Now, some people maybe didn't quite understand or think about the longer term consequences. I get that, but now it's brought to the table. Now we are talking about it. Now we are thinking about it.
Good point. Here's I've grown fond of this statement. Ken says, we as producers need to stand together, do not comply. During the things I went through in my civil disobedience, acts of non-compliance, there was a part of that I was missing. This isn't the whole statement, Ken. The whole statement is we as, and I'll say we as citizens need to stand together, do not comply, and enact change. That's the last part of the sentence, because I'll tell you right now, when you stand up in civil disobedience and you don't comply with something, whether it's what the CFIA is doing, or firearms regulations, or Alberta Public Health Code that says your restaurant has to be closed, it doesn't matter how many people you have with you, unless it's like half the country. Our government and the enforcement agents that these bureaucrats use to enforce their policies, because CFIA has no enforcement ability, AHS has no enforcement ability. They have to get a court or the cops to do the enforcement. That's the way it is. We think they don't. We think we can just stand together, enough people, and stop it. We can't. I had there was probably close to 2,000 people at my restaurant when I protested and got arrested. And people said, "We'll just bring enough people, and what can they do?" Well, I find out later they had enough machinery and buses and police and equipment standing by to arrest 3,000 people at the Whistle Stop Cafe when I held my protest.
Wow.
We were in Ottawa. There was hundreds of thousands of people there, and we thought, we just bring enough people and they won't do anything. No, they always have enough enforcement to shut us down, to put us in jail. We say, "Oh, Danielle Smith's not going to enforce the gun ban." Well, whatever. People have registered guns. She doesn't enforce it. They become a criminal. They lose their passport. They can't cross the border. They're criminals. They go out anywhere else in the country and they're arrested. So the idea that we can just say, "Do not comply," and that's going to do it, that's only half the conversation. The second part of it is do the work and make the change, because the non-compliance only lasts for so long before the long arm of the government just comes down and they hammer you. And when they do, 3/4 of those people that say that they're with you, they have your back, they will be scared and they will turn away and they won't be there for you. So it's extremely important to get the numbers and make the changes while we're not complying. That's my personal experience anyway. There was 2 other questions. Yeah, good point, Don. Pause is not a stop. There is a pause, which gives some reprieve and some more conversations can be had, and maybe it can be made to come to a stop, but only if people get involved and start taking control. Where was it? I keep forgetting to ask people to put question marks in front of the questions, and then I miss them, but maybe that wasn't it. Have you guys got anything else that you want to add before we wrap up? We've got another 5 minutes or so, I guess.
Well, the big thing is Tuesday night, Tuesday, January the 13th, in Innisfail at the Innisfail Legion at 7 o'clock. There is a farmer-led meeting. We will be going over the latest stuff. Actually, we're going to be going over the proposed regulations that were paused. There is a PDF that CFIA put out. It'll take about 5 minutes to go through, so everyone can be informed properly about the changes that were coming and are now paused. We're going to hear from a former deer producer who had CFIA knock on his door one day and said his animals were infected. They came, killed all his animals, and proved the animals were disease-free. So he's going to be talking about his experience with CFIA. Lance is going to be talking. I know there are going to be representatives from different industry groups there. I think there's going to be 1 or 2 MLAs showing up. I heard maybe an MP. So it's an opportunity for you to get out and show your support to changing these traceability regulations so they're beneficial to farmers and helpful to the industry instead of just centralizing control in Ottawa.
Sorry, Tim, can you say the time and place one more time?
Tuesday, January 13th, 7 p.m., Innisfail Legion in Innisfail.
Tuesday, January 13th, 7 p.m.,
Innisfail
Legion. I'll just put it up in the comments, and then if people ask after, I'll be able to put it up.
And Max from Freedom Calendar is planning to be there to live stream the event. So if you live more than 2 hours away and can't drive to Innisfail, you can watch it on YouTube.
What a great guy. He's done a lot of work to get information to people. Like, he is everywhere. If you haven't met Max yet, folks, and you see him at one of these events, go up and say hi. He's a heck of a guy.
Yeah.
Maybe that was it. Maybe there was no, again, pound salt, do not comply. There's a second part of that. Enact change. Don't comply, but be the change. You have to have both. One doesn't work with the other.
And I saw a question, Chris, that talked about if Alberta separates, can we keep the CFIA out? Yes, we can. 100%. We just have to make sure that we have right people in government so they don't create an AFIA that brings all the same problems back to us.
Yep. One of the things that I consider is, how do we make sure that these things don't happen with legislation? The only way to do it is to do similar to what the United States has done with their constitution. The United States is not a democracy. It's a republic based on foundational law that is almost impossible to change. And that foundational law enshrines property rights. And in independent Alberta, in my opinion, we should be enshrining property rights so that the threshold for government doing things like this is so high. I mean, next to impossible. And the reason I say that, it's not because I don't think that we shouldn't be protected from diseases, but the farmer or producer is always going to be the best person to deal with that because they're right there. And if they don't protect their market and their customers, they'll go out of business. So, we absolutely can do this, and we will. We will.
Chris, I'm just reading the comments. There's a few comments that the meeting is canceled. That is incorrect. The meeting is not canceled. I'm one of the organizers. It is going on. So if you see someone saying the meeting's canceled, it's not true. We had asked a representative from CCIA to come and explain the regulations. And then as soon as the Alberta beef producers said they want to pause, CCIA decided to back out and said it doesn't make sense for them to come explain it since there's probably going to be a pause. We asked CFIA to send a rep so they can explain what they're doing. No comment. Maybe there will be a CFIA person hidden in the crowd, but they will not be presenting. And that's why you're going to have to put up with me going through the regulations instead of someone who wrote them.
Wouldn't it be nice if conversations could just happen when they needed to happen? I once heard a young man say, when conversations end, bad things begin.
Yeah.
I heard it said human beings either trade value or violence. So we either trade value in our words and through trade, or we start shooting each other. So we have to have that value exchange of ideas and goods.
Yeah, and if you don't believe that, folks, just crack a couple history books. Tim is 100% correct on that. That's my friend Mitch says we have an opportunity to spend some currency, to expend some currency to change the world. And that currency that you and me and Tim and Lance are going to expend is our time. We're going to give up our time. Tim's been giving up his time for quite some time, as have I, and I see Lance is too. If we pay for our freedom in the currency of time over the next year or 2 years, we will succeed. Where others had to pay, the currency they paid was their blood and their lives. And nobody wants that. So I think we should really just be grateful for the opportunity that we can pay in our time.
Well, just think of the ROI of the time. If you invest time in working for Alberta independence this year, and if you go and vote yes for Alberta independence, the return on your investment is going to be multi-generational because of the reduced taxes you're going to pay, your kids, your grandkids, and everyone else down your family line. And all it takes is for you to get involved for 6 months to change your entire family's history. Or you could just stay home and watch Netflix, right?
I have so much fun going to these events, Tim. I have met more like stellar human beings in the last 5 years than I have probably in the rest of my life. People think that this is it's just work. It's not just work. Like, this is an absolutely life-changing, great experience to be attending events with like-minded people, having conversations with people like I am with Tim and Lance that I would have never had it not been for, what happened to me. This is a wonderful, blessed experience. It is not just all work. So I want you folks to remember that. You can have some fun, meet some great people, make some great friends, and change the world. Like, really, it's a win-win. There is no way to lose if you get on board with this this idea, with this movement.
Oh, that's right.
I saw a comment there that they're saying it's an Alberta beef producers meeting. Maybe that's maybe I missed that one, but the meeting on Tuesday is not the Alberta beef producers. It is a farmer-led meeting just to get beef producers in the room, to be informed and to share their experiences. And so we can learn from each other, and then we can learn what we have to do to act to keep fighting this, because a pause is not a stop.
100%. Yeah, Vicky said that. There's rumor the meeting is canceled. No, the meeting isn't canceled. And there's so many questions. I put it in the comments, and I was going to put it up on the screen, and now I can't find my own comments because there's so much. But let me see if I get it right. Tuesday, January 13th, 7 p.m. Innisfail Legion.
Yeah.
Is that right? And I'll post it on the Facebook page as an event, folks.
Can I just add, and I think it's important to go to these Alberta beef producer meetings, and they are happening now. Like tomorrow, I'm just pulling it up. Tomorrow is at Le Crete. They move down to High Prairie, Grand Prairie, Drayton Valley, Leduc, Barrhead, Olds. They're all across Alberta, and it's happening over the next 5 weeks, a couple a week, moving north to south. And I also just want to add, I actually talked to the Alberta beef producers president this morning, and like, they want to get this right. They do. Like, it was a good conversation, a really good conversation. And so if we go to these meetings and we can bring forward resolutions that make sense and add value, like this is a critical moment for us as an industry, right? That I think we need to make sure that we give it enough respect, because what we do now will affect how our grandkids raise cattle. So we have to think about this very clearly.
Yeah,
this is a critical juncture for our society. What we do in the next little while is going to determine whether we deserve freedom and liberty or don't. Because if we do not take up the cross and move in the right direction as a people, unified towards freedom and liberty, we simply don't deserve it. So we either way, we're going to get what we deserve. And I truly believe that Albertans deserve freedom and liberty.
Yeah. For more information on the Alberta beef producers meetings, just go to Google, type Eventbrite, because the tickets are for sale on Eventbrite, Alberta beef producer meetings, and it will come up for you.
Perfect. Okay, well, I didn't see any other questions that really popped out at me. I will go through the comments afterwards, folks, like usual, and I'll do my best to get every question, because I always miss some. But I do want to say, like, thank you very much, everybody, for being so active in the comments. Like, this is fantastic. It's great to see so many people paying attention to these things, knowing that there's that many people paying attention. And I know that a lot of you folks, you're action people, you're doers, you're going to do something. It gives me great hope, and I hope it does for you, Lance, and you, Tim, as well. And on that note, I am very thankful that there are men like you two who are willing to stand up and get public and take the tomatoes and the eggs sometimes, from people that disagree with you, to stand up for what you believe in. Because if it wasn't for guys like you speaking out on these things, we would be much, much worse off, and probably the control agenda would be a lot further down the line. So thank you very much.
Yeah. The future is worth fighting for.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for allowing this platform too. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. And thank you for producing the wonderful Alberta beef that you do. We are very grateful for that.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'll let you gentlemen go. I'm going to wrap up and probably see you at the next big thing.
Okay. Tuesday, 7 p.m. Innisfail Legion.
All right. Maybe I'll see you there. I'll do my best.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Night, guys. Thanks again. Well, there you go, folks. That was The common theme is control and overreach and freedom and liberties and rights and all of these things. 90% of the conversations that we've had on these platforms since I've been doing it, those are the themes. And if you really want to solve these problems, we have an opportunity to do it. Somebody on YouTube left this comment, and I'm going to end on this. My constitutional rights, my inalienable rights, liberties, and freedoms are not up for debate, nor are they up for forfeiting for the majority rules. I believe that as well, and that's how I want to live. But the reality is, the structure in which we find ourselves right now, the governance that we're under right now, the laws that we're under right now, do not offer that to us. They do not. I will tell you that as a man who has attended illegal church services in Canada. I have assembled with my peers for political purpose, illegally, in a clandestine fashion, hidden from the government and hidden from the law, because had I been found, I would have been arrested. I have been arrested on my own property, not having said a harmful word or harmed anybody. I have been arrested for the crime of protesting. Now, you folks and I, we want rights, freedoms, and liberty. If you want those things, I'm going to tell you, you cannot have them unless we work for them. You don't have them now, but we could have them in a very, very short period of time. If you get on board with the idea of an independent Alberta, in which we write a constitution, the people do. We write it for us. And it tells the government how they may interact with us. You will have freedom and liberty that you desire, just like what this statement says. If you don't, we're going to continue with the status quo. We're going to continue in the managed decline that this country is in, both morally, economically, and with government and freedoms. And we're going to have nobody to blame but ourselves. Please consider that. And I will be speaking a little bit more on that subject very shortly. I believe 10:15. I have an extremely important announcement for anybody that cares about this province and anybody that cares about this country. My announcement is going to be regarding the current petition drive for triggering a referendum on Alberta independence via the Citizens Initiative Act. Please be back 10:15. It'll be 15, 20 minutes, and then I'll let you go to bed sleeping on that. But don't miss it. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Meow. Nobody fought for your freedom. They fought so that you'd have the opportunity to keep your freedom. Don't let those people down.